final of the NFL season. It's a full contact sport in which the players wear body armour and helmets, but the protection isn't always adequate. We're going back more than 10 years to the moment when doctors first made the link between American football and brain damage. Here's Jonathan Fenton Fisher.
September 24th, 2002. Mike Webster, one of the greatest American football players in history, a man once known as Iron Mike for his toughness on the field, is lying in a hospital bed. His son, Garret Webster, is with him.
He had suffered a heart attack that weekend. He had become very pale, almost as white as a sheet. His lips were purple. That happened on a Saturday. And then by Sunday, it had progressed to the point where he finally allowed us to take him to the hospital. The doctors examined him. It went very quickly from he's going to be out of this in a couple days to, you need to get your family out here because it doesn't look like he's going to make it. I think everybody views their dad as being invincible. And with my dad being, quote-unquote, Iron Mike Webster, being a football player, for me it was even more of a, no matter what happens, he's going to get up and walk out of here in a couple days.
Mike Webster never did walk out of the hospital. He died on the Monday night. But his family refused to accept that it was the heart attack alone that killed him. They insisted on an autopsy.
We knew that he had severe mental issues from playing football. There wasn't a name for it at that point in time. It was just, there has to be something more to this. When he passed away, and really those options for an autopsy to do a really thorough examination, for myself personally, it made sense.
And then when the results came back, when they'd looked at the brain, there were some rather surprising findings.
Yeah, when they started to look at the brain, he started noticing things called tau proteins, which basically mucked up his way of thinking. They found that stuff and they started to tell us, and it took a long time for us to really accept how big of a deal it was what they found in my dad's brain with those tau proteins.
The big deal was that tau proteins, such as these, were normally found in the shriveled brains of Alzheimer's sufferers in their 90s. But Mike Webster was 50, and his brain appeared normal at first glance. Furthermore, he'd had no history of concussions on the field during his playing days. It led the doctors to reach a conclusion that, if true, would have huge repercussions for the game. They believed that even with the protection of a helmet, the hundreds and thousands of small hits that every football player receives during their careers could lead to a brain disease called chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE.
We're from the town with a great football team. We cheer the Pittsburgh Steelers. Chuck North and North.
Pittsburgh Steelers fans had a lot to cheer about in the 1970s. Their team won 4 Super Bowls in that decade alone, and Mike Webster was key to that success.
He played the center on their offensive line, which is really the focal point of the offense and where it runs through. And he won 4 Super Bowl rings for the Steelers in the mid-'70s. He won his first Super Bowl the first year he was drafted, and they won their last Super Bowl in 1980. He's pretty much considered one of the greatest centers and offensive linemen of all time.
And is the center a position where you perhaps take more hits to the head than you would in any other position on the field?
Yeah, it's definitely the where that first moment of contact is going to be. Center snaps the ball to the quarterback. Usually there's a defensive tackle right over him. So it's right when he moves, that guy in front of him moving at the exact same time. He pretty much gets hit right away. So it's kind of like, you're taking that hit, but that's how the play starts.
3rd down and 1 from the 1-yard line. And he just walks right into the end zone for a touchdown. Pittsburgh touchdown.
After a playing career that lasted over 25 years, Webster retired on a high in 1990. But over the next 10 years, his life would fall apart. He began to suffer from memory loss, anger, even thoughts of suicide. The Pittsburgh Steelers team doctor, Julian Bales, continued to treat him throughout that period.
During those years, he had a downward spiral that included confusion, anger. He borrowed a taser from a policeman friend of his, and he would tase himself, as he said, to try to jog himself out of the mental fog, the condition he was in mentally. He abused some drugs that he felt would maybe help put him in a better frame of mind, a better thought process.
Dr. Bales remembers that as the mental and physical pain got worse, Mike Webster also became distant from those around him.
I remember very distinctly having a long talk with Mike probably 2 or 3 years before he died, and he was standing against the wall in my office in the hospital, and I just remember that very poignant scene, how confused, how saddened. It really didn't make sense to most people why he did the radical behaviors such as leaving his wife and kids, who he ostensibly loved, why he became homeless, why he was so disorganized in his approach to his personal and business life.
By the time of Mike Webster's death in 2002, Dr. Bales had moved from Pittsburgh, but he was shown the autopsy results, and he immediately knew the significance of what had been discovered.
I remember distinctly telling my wife after reviewing the Mike Webster case for the first time that this is not going to be a fun journey. But I felt it was something scientifically and medically we had to explore. We had to get to the bottom of it. We had to have the truth set us free, and we had to make changes in the sport.
Dr. Bales went on to conduct a further autopsy on Mike Webster, as well as on other former players, including some who had committed suicide. After seeing the same results in several of those cases, he became convinced of the link between American football and CTE. But his findings were initially met with skepticism by the authorities. He remembers a major conference in 2007 when he was asked to represent the medical community in a presentation to the National Football League.
The reaction was skepticism, it was disbelief, it was dismissiveness, and some of that is understandable because we were reporting again things which were not necessarily expected, and these were the early cases. We had known that someone who had multiple brain concussions could have a career-ending situation, but for it to be someone who maybe necessarily didn't have concussions, and Mike Webster had no history of concussions, this was counterintuitive to think that you could end up with chronic brain damage in a helmeted sport and not have a history replete with concussions.
Today, as one of America's leading neurosurgeons, Dr. Bales continues to fight for a better understanding of brain injuries in football players. He acknowledges that the NFL has done much to improve the game and reduce the chance of head injuries.
There have been changes in the rules to try to prevent head-to-head contact. There have been changes in how players are managed, meaning a lot more conservatively. There are more neurological doctors involved in the decision-making and care of the athlete. At the NFL level on down, there's been less and less unnecessary contact, particularly at practice. So there have been changes, and I think the sport is much better and well served by them.
Mike Webster's son, Garret, has also become involved in the field of football and brain research, and in the fight for recognition for former players and their families. A federal judge is currently reviewing a settlement worth over $750 million made at the start of this season between the NFL and almost 5,000 former players. Mike Webster's family, however, is not likely to benefit. If the settlement goes through, they will receive nothing, since Webster died before the cutoff period of 2006. Garret, though, says he remains immensely proud of what his father achieved.
His influence on the field and off the field means a huge amount to me. The Super Bowl rings, the Pro Bowls, the fame and the glory obviously mean a lot, but also that fact that when my dad passed away, he left something that's going to help generations and generations of people, not just football players, but Army personnel, cops, women's, high school soccer players. There's a litany of people that my dad's going to help. Because of that, my life has meant something, because I've gotten to do some wonderful things and help some people. That means a huge amount to me.
Garret Webster, the son of American football star Mike Webster, ending that report by Jonathan Fenton Fisher. And that's all for this week. We'll have more insights from figures who've played a part in our history next week, and I do hope you'll join us again then. This is Max Pearson. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.
I'm Stephen Colbert. This week on Selected Shorts, who's crazy now?
I wouldn't be seeing Dr. Morales much longer. He was a madman for whom conservative Freudianism was merely a flag of convenience.
Join guest host Stephen Colbert for stories in which men challenge each other. Tomorrow at 1 on AM 820 and 10 p.m. on 93.9 FM.
You're listening to WNYC New York. Good morning, I'm Mark Garber. The weather forecast will have a mostly cloudy and cold morning with a low of 21. Then mostly cloudy and warmer today with a high of 45. Tonight continued mostly cloudy with patchy fog, a low of 36, and mostly cloudy and warmer on Sunday with a chance of rain, patchy fog in the morning, a high 52.
This is WNYC, FM and HD, New York.
I'm John Donvan, and this is Intelligence Squared US, Oxford-style debate